Good morning and welcome to Weekend Walkabout in our gardens and yours virtually.
Coming to you from GardenAtoZ.org. I'm Janet McConovich.
I'm Stephen Nicola and we're in New Zealand.
Yep, and so our topic today is New Zealand's North Island flora and other things that come along the way with it. We're here as we have been every time before with our daughter Sonia Nicola, and now we are here
Literally
with our
here.
daughter Sonia Nicola and her husband Cam, touring New England. The last
New England.
New something.
New Zealand.
New Zealand, isn't it? Okay.
It's 1 o'clock in the morning, people.
Yeah, we're a little out of time in that case. We were on the North Island all of last week. That's what we're going to tell you about. Next week, we'll tell you about the South Island and what we think about the two of them together. This is a great way to talk with you. There will be an outline at some point, but I don't know what points you want to put in or we need to put in. It's begun here. We're going to work this way through it about the long journey and the time difference and what our priorities are, Steve's and mine, when we go into a new place, if we're trying to learn about gardens, in the places that we went to accomplish those things. That's what it looks like now, and it does not have much meat to it, but it has a lot of meat to it in the presentation you're going to see right now. So I've broken it into 3 parts because there is a lot going on here. Starting with part 1 around Auckland, because we were based all of last week out of Auckland, the main largest city in New Zealand. So we'll take along with that. And we're going to start with the fact that it's a long journey. It takes a long time to get here. It was a little over 4-hour, nearly 5-hour flight from Ontario's Toronto airport on Air Canada. So nice to see those red maple leaves on the planes. We left from there to go to Vancouver. Along the way, they entertained us with things that made us realize we're in a different place. At least 4 of the films that I found were Indigenous based, written, or involved. This one was about in a remote Arctic community, a group of Inuit girls fight off an alien invasion, all while trying to make it to the coolest party in town. I mean, cool things for kids to look at. At the Vancouver airport, great airport, what a beautiful place.
Yep.
In the international wing anyway. This is an atrium that they were wrong order. Great murals on the atrium. They were projecting scenes from the local aquarium. There's you might be able to see a seal swimming by.
Yeah, and visually at first I really thought they had
we
seals.
Thought the seals were in the aquarium. There was a tank in the aquarium. Just entertaining things like that they make you feel welcome. They make you feel like the journey is worth it, because from that point, after 5 hours in the air already, now we needed 14 more hours to go from Vancouver to New Zealand. Yeah, yep. It's a long way. And they are very nice. I thought that all airports had these fill up your own water bottles things now, but it turns out some airports don't. And it's nice to know when they are accommodating you like that. When we got onto the New Zealand air, we knew we were in a different place because their instructions to you for how to use the seatbelts and the life preservers, etc., included their narrators. Their narrators in a can you say it for me? Warraki. Is that right, Sonia? I can't say it right.
I'm afraid I do not remember. It was air canoe in Maori.
Right, in Maori at Werkari Dung. Well, anyway, they were narrating from a floating war canoe
that was being guided by
a Maori. Yeah. Oh, Tangaroa, the guardian. Yeah. And gave us pictures of. So we were hearing about seatbelts, but we were seeing where we were going, and it was just a different kind of looking at things.
And really quite ingenious. Yeah, I thought.
And okay, Stephen didn't see this.
No, I had butterflies in mine.
I said, Stephen, have you been into the restroom? No, he said, yeah, I've been in the restroom. What about it? I said, did you see the books that they have on the wallpaper? The Mile High Club tell-all stories, the importance of aiming. Let's say the flying through the ages. I mean, it was just little touches like that made you feel a little bit more like you weren't on just a plane. They also fed us well and were very attentive to us. And when we got off of the plane and headed out to the cars where the cars were parked, we found, based on what our local host told us, that it was a brand new parking arrangement during the COVID years. new parking structures have been built further away from the airport, but between the airport terminal and the structures, they have this great cover. I mean, what a humane thing to do, to say, give people a place to walk there and there. This is all outside the building, helping you get over to the car park without, and I said, that's a really, it just tells you things that it's not, oh, I probably didn't pull this down far enough to see. It's not just things like going to the grocery store and not knowing the brands that are there, and having to remember that cookies are called biscuits.
Yeah.
There are other things that are underlying these differences that are just so much fun for me to see and understand, or try to understand about what's different. For instance, the attitude toward cats and mammals in general, and in New Zealand is quite different. This is our host's cat. Is this Hobbs?
Perhaps
This is
that's the only
Hobbs.
one I ever
Yeah.
saw.
The wildlife in New Zealand consists almost completely, or heavily of birds. There are only 2 mammal species that are native to the New Zealand islands, and that's 2 bat species, flying species. So there was nothing on the ground. It was why a lot of birds evolved in New Zealand to live on the ground, because they didn't have predators roaming around. Well, we Westerners, we Europeans, brought with us, and the Maori brought with them too, probably at some point, animals for herding, like sheep, goats, pigs. They inadvertently brought rats. They intentionally brought possums for fur. This is the Australian possum, a little different than ours. And those things all began to hunt birds. And cats, we know, are terrible hunters of birds. So they have a different attitude toward the animals than we do, and toward, oh, I cut off your head too, Steve, forgot to make this one smaller, and toward anybody bringing in anything now that might bring in
problems,
might bring in pests and diseases, microscopic things. So Steve, for instance, in the Vancouver airport, had to sacrifice his nuts and raisins because
there's no raisins, it's cherries.
Cherries.
There's a big difference.
But there's still vegetable products. There's still fruits and vegetable products, which you cannot take into New Zealand. And Sonia, do you want to tell them, Sonia, what happened to you when you first went to New Zealand?
Well, I will say, just because Stacy has typed in the chat, she's asked about, have you tried Vegemite yet? And I said, these are heretics. They won't even try my Vegemite. I eat Vegemite every day. The first time I came here in 2004, I connected through Seoul, Korea, and I was there for about 2 days. And when I got to the airport, one of their sniffer beagles, which are the most adorable things to get caught by in an airport, caught me. And I freaked out because I'd been told no produce. The plastic baggie, the Ziploc that I'd had my carrot sticks in that I'd eaten in Seoul the day before, the beagle still smelled that there had been carrot sticks in that bag. So they are not messing around.
No, they do not.
Not messing around. They don't want,
they are
boots. Serious. Sonia and Cam's boots were inspected and bagged,
radiated,
right?
And whatever they did to them.
At any rate. Why did I put the, oh, this is to tell you that there are some notes on here. I'm starting with the long way from home and just talked about the long journey. So not only a lot of miles, but the cultural differences. And we were very impressed along the way with New Zealand's kindness to and their strictness and their sense of hospitality all the way around. We're 17 hours ahead of you. So we are currently at 1 in the morning or going on 2 in the morning now on Sunday. And it's hard figuring that out. It's now everywhere at the same time, but we have to call it a different date at a time. It's and the seasons are in reverse. So we are here in the spring of New Zealand. I know that is elementary for a lot of people, but some people don't think of it. It's why one of the reasons that we're here. When Stephen and I were gardening professionally, and Sonia was still a youngster at home, we would talk about how we couldn't afford to take a vacation during the season when it's gardening, because we couldn't take the time, and we couldn't afford, for money's reasons, in the winter to take a break. But if we ever did, we would go somewhere in the winter. Somewhere where we could see gardens in the winter, and that would be New Zealand. Well, Sonia remembered that and arranged for this trip for us. Children ahead. Okay. At any rate, so we came here with the priorities, with a list of things that we wanted to do, Steve wants to do, I want to do, Sonia wants to do,
And Cam wants to
Sonia's
do.
husband wants to do, and we made some priorities. Sonia calls it, when I explained some of the things that Stephen and I wanted to do, she called it input to feed Iron Man's glasses. If you are, as we are, comic book movie watchers, then you will know that Iron Man can put on his glasses, which through the glasses he sees a little information about everything he looks at. And she said, I can see that my mom and dad are looking around here going, input needed, input needed. We don't know what any of these plants are.
Yeah.
So the first things that we decided we needed to do was walk around the landscape. We do that every time we go to a new place.
Yep.
And then we need to go to a garden center.
We love looking at garden centers to see how they arrange, what they do,
And-
and how much things cost.
And what things people are buying in the area,
yep.
because sometimes when you
What's-
don't know what it is, seeing it at the garden center makes a difference, and to a botanical garden. So we're going to start there. It keeps taking it away from me. So we'll go around Auckland first. We'll look and see the terrain and what's going on here. It's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful, diverse city of old and new. Not as old as places in Europe where we've been, because
Yep.
this has only really been since the mid 1800s that there have been settlements here of any good size. And it means that this is a part of the downtown area looking, I think we were on Queen Street here.
Yeah.
Walking up Queen Street, where you have the brand new buildings right next to the older buildings, like the Guardian building. And unlike some cities, they're preserving both.
Yeah.
Lots of plantings, lots of greenery, and I'll tell you, everything grows here. It's one of the reasons we always wanted to come here. It's a moderated climate. We thought the Pacific Northwest really was the cat's pajamas for being able
Yeah.
to grow everything, but you can certainly grow everything here. So where you look at the outside world and see, you see what appears to be a pine tree next to a maple tree, next to a palm tree.
Throwing an oak for fun.
All of them growing happily together, and many of them not, in this case, that particular palm is not a native, although the tree on the right is a native. But in the native community in New Zealand, there is that diversity. There are palms native,
Mhm.
tree ferns native, evergreens with broad leaves, evergreens with needle leaves, and deciduous plants all native in the same area. There's also a bright city. Even the trains, this one going by that told us to look and listen and don't
Stop
be
looking, listen, and don't be distracted. And yet the train going by is super
very
colorful.
distracting, distracting train. And lots of little things that you notice that are, I think, interesting, that they don't allow as much weight on the roads.
They're cement mixers. Look at the sides of that truck and look at the little drum compared to what we see in Michigan anyway.
Almost looks like a toy cement mixer to a certain extent. But despite the fact that they don't have frost laws, they're being lighter on their roads. And that's
Yep.
an interesting thing to look at. There is a look to many of the older established neighborhoods. This is about a 1900 to 1920 house. Lots and lots of them in kind of tract communities with this same look. And if you look at down most, as you get into newer neighborhoods, you have some that kind of replicate that low, lean look. Steve took this picture because he loved the little garage.
I thought the garage was so cool to go with the house.
But right down the street, what, 3 houses away, 4 houses away, here's this modern new concrete structure. And many of those houses sitting on hills. San Francisco has nothing on Auckland for hilly. Yes, they've got low flat areas, but lots of incredible hills with great views.
And Auckland is a much more sprawling city than I expected.
Yeah.
It's very big and so many different areas that you can go to with totally different views of just cool.
Yeah, the things like being able to look quite a ways away toward the Sky Tower. I'm pretty sure it's called the Sky Tower.
Yep.
Good views of lots of different things. And hills, these hills that you're going up and down like that just erupt out of the ground.
And that one literally erupt. That's a volcano.
This is volcanic land. This is a place where people by that lump right there, when you see lumps sticking out like that, or you can see the distance there. We don't have a good picture of it yet. That's Rangitoto. That one erupted about 300 years ago, but people in Auckland or families that have been in Auckland for quite a while, like the hosts that we have here, can talk about their ages in terms of when trees appeared on the side of what was a bare volcanic.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not sure that I feel real good about planting where you talk about when that hill last erupted, and that hill is right there near you. But anyway, lots of cool plantings, and of course we're interested in the plantings. What's in front of that store, a tree fern and a cabbage tree, which many of us know as a cordyline or cordyline, if you want to say it that way. So Steve and I go and walk neighborhoods and hope to find gardeners to talk to. In front of this house, that line that you see there is not a woody hedge, it's deciduous, but hedge look is what's preferred. It's the very European look that we've seen elsewhere. Either a fence or a hedge is put out toward the street. It's kind of build the house, put in a hedge, then worry about what to put inside of it. So you can go down the street and that's what it is. Hedge. And
or wall.
And unfortunately, I can't chin myself up over a hedge the way I used to be able to chin myself on walls until Steve, after chinning up and looking to say, oh, here's a good one, Steve, put your camera up high and take a picture.
And some of these hedges were taller anyway.
And some of them are quite thorny.
Spiky.
But the hedges offer you the chance to have a neat entryway, which is cool.
And neat peaks into little gardens.
Right, where there might be an open door or a closed door, a lot of closed doors and a lot of security gates across fences now, across driveways. And this is a volcanic rock, a cut rock, volcanic rock wall. It gives you the opportunity to have a neat wall too, if you've got the wherewithal to do that. The neat little garage that Steve liked had this brick wall around it, where at the top of each column.
No, the house it did, but not this one. This was a different one. See, that's not the little brick house. Okay. This is a different one that had every chimney here had a planter in it.
And you can also plant at the base of the wall, although there's not a lot of room when they right out of the street like this. Do. And some people
go extreme.
Yeah, this is that big house down the street from the one with the little garage.
The big house was across the street. This is another one.
Okay, and it's got a two-part hedge. There's a lower bit and an upper bit, and if you look down the hill, you can see that they're grown right one on top of the other. The one is a tree called Eugenia, I think. We're still learning. Okay, disclaimer, I know nothing.
I've always known nothing, so
I am
it's great.
So in awe and so humbled over all the plants that are here. I do know a couple of them now, I think, but it's going to be a while. I would have to live here years, I think, to know these things for sure. So if you look behind the hedges where you can, you might find that there's just lawn. You might find very nifty little detailed gardens. The lavender there is Lavender stoicus, the French lavender, one that is not hardy in Michigan or the Northeast United States, and so we don't usually grow it. But it's a beautiful little plant, and it's been cut back regularly. I'm nosy enough to see that, along with tree roses that don't have to be buried in the wintertime, hardly even lose their leaves. You see brick patterns that are used there and throughout the area. Some people don't have anything. They are using the space for walking or for an extra space on the patio or for parking.
And they don't have massive yards. They use their space. They're very efficient with their space, and probably jealous.
Yeah, because things like
whatever space
things like trash cans have to go someplace too. The trees down the street are some things that are different about the trees down the street. They haven't had a chestnut blight. They haven't had an elm blight. They still have the trees they originally planted.
Trees,
and they are massive trees. They are impressive, massive trees, many of them. Some of them are native. Most of them are not. Of the biggest ones,
some of the biggest ones are
not, because they were planting the things they were familiar with.
London plane tree, English oak,
eucalyptus. What's cool about looking at the trees is looking at the weeds that grow in and around them. This is a weed. This is a cabbage tree that's decided to root itself into the moist crotch of this tree. I think this was a Chinese medlar. This one is a little hebe. That's a native shrub. One of many species of hebes are native in New Zealand, but there's a little hebe. Think of it like a heather or heath growing in the crotch in a tree.
It's also very cool to be in a country that has lawn, but they don't care if there's weeds in it. They don't care if there's different foliage. Green, mowed, nice.
Yeah.
And their lawns look just as good as ours.
There are definitely purists. We talked with one of them.
Oh, yeah.
And she has an incredible lawn, and there's
Yes.
not a thing other than lawn in it. But most of the places, what you see are English daisies and plantain and
Probably
dandelions
chamomile
and
things like
oxalis growing in it, and they just mow it short. And that we see that in England and in
no
Europe.
fertilizer trucks running around. I
Well,
didn't see one.
Well, okay, you haven't seen the ad.
I said I had them.
Yeah. And you might, when you're looking in the trees, find different critters. There are skinks and geckos that are native here, quite a number of them. This one came to visit while we were having breakfast at a brunch at a restaurant, sitting on the outside patio. The backyards are not very large and might look very much like, and they do look very much like ours. Some are more informal. This is our host's mom's garden. And some are more formal, like this one. We did get invited into the backyard in these two cases. And this was down the street from the first one, where it's a much more formal garden. And he explained to us exactly where he was moving some of those clivia. Those are clivias that are blooming there.
Yeah, that's not tulips.
That's clivia. That's that indoor plant that many of us know about. Some plants that we find in the yards are going to look very familiar to us. The Dutch iris is popular there. It has a longer blooming iris than others. Others are that grow outside. This, although it's in a pot, can be outside all year long. It's one of the echeverias. I'm pretty sure it's an echeveria, which is a woody plant when it can live all year. It doesn't stay like a little hens and chick low in the ground. So it can live all year round. You'd recognize lantana probably, but not as a plant that grows outside
sprawling
all year. Yeah, as a shrub, or this one was a tree form lantana. Some of them are familiar, but only if you look hard at them and go, what is that? Well, that's lavender. Plain old lavender like you and I can grow. About 5 feet tall.
And 7 or 8 feet wide.
And desperately in need of being cut back and pruned so that it comes back from the base. Our host told us that she hadn't cut her lavender back and she was thinking about digging it out because it just gets woody and cruddy looking. I said, well, you need to cut it back.
You can do that?
She said, well, they told me we can't do that. I said, yes, of course you can do that. Those of us in the north do that all the time. So do they in the French fields. Some things will look familiar and you might drive by and think it's a rose. That's a camellia. That's a camellia. I said, Stephen, it's a camellia.
Lots of them.
And this one, take a look at this one and tell me if you know what this is. I'll show you the flower. Do you recognize New Guinea impatiens when it's a perennial? Those stems
are woody.
Yeah, and almost they're thicker than my thumb at the base. And just it's a plant that comes back every year. Can be cut back and it'll grow back up, or you can leave it up and it's already blooming at the beginning of the spring, which is about where we are now. That looked like a hedge of daylilies in front of the house we first showed you, the front yard. That's agapanthus, the blue blooming, for us, late summer blue flower. Here it blooms off and on all through the summer, and is has been registered as an invasive weed by the Weed Council, at least in some areas. So they don't sell it anymore. Other places you see orchids
growing outside.
One gardener we talked to, beautiful orchids, and they were in pots, great big pots out in the yard. And I said, do those can those stay out all year? Pretty much. She said, pretty much. I moved them here from our we've got what do they call it? A beach house.
Beach house.
They're also called batches or bachelor houses. She said, I moved it here from there. It stays out all the time there. I'm not sure if I'm really going to leave it outside here all the time. But these gorgeous orchids, huge clusters of orchids, and some things that you'll recognize like wisteria. And we'll get back to this wisteria in a little bit about why does it look so beautiful there? Because that's related to those hedges that we showed you. These hedges, I talk to people about how often they clip hedges and when they clip hedges. And it's kind of every 3 months, these hedges need to be cut because they grow all year long.
And there are miles of hedges in Auckland.
Including in farm fields. There are hedges and hedges and hedges. It's very
You fly over it in the plane and
right. Steve pointed, he said, look down there. He says, it looks like, see, it looks like it looks almost like hedges. I said, it is hedges. It's hedges of trees.
Yep.
At any rate, they prune a lot here. It's European style. And plants are not let to just do what they want to do in most cases. They clip them. And that's why those wisterias bloom so well. When they get up above the fence, they clip them off. When it gets up above the fence, they clip them off. The only place that it can develop flowering spurs is close to the main vine. And so it looks beautiful in the spring when mostly it's flowers before the leaves come out.
And we are here in spring.
This gentleman told me that, I said, so when do you prune it? He said, like clockwork, every 3 months, the guy from the most expensive garden center in the city comes here to prune the top of it, just the top of it. I pick up the clippings and whatever, and it'd cost more if he did it, but I do the sides, but I can't do the top. But every 3 months it has to be done. I went, yuck. Some things we recognize, Steve, this is a callistemon or that means beauty flower, beauty brush plant, and it's a tree. Some things I'm hoping maybe you can chat into that. I'm looking right now for what this might be. Go ahead and take a picture of this with it if you'd like to. I tried picture this and it does work. But I prefer to learn a different way. I prefer to learn. I don't want to learn just the name. I want to learn what it's related to and how I can group some plants together. So far I haven't looked at this one. It might be a Chinese medlar. But maybe if you recognize it, you can tell me about it. Or this, which might be a dactylorhiza orchid.
So many
things that you don't see. This is possibly a coprosmia. It's called mirror leaf or mirror plant, but I'm working on that one. And things that are familiar. There's bear's breeches growing in here. Bear's breeches has also been declared an invasive.
Invasive here. Yep.
This is one of the native coffee plants. It's a, let's see, what is its botanical name? I have to think hard about what the botanical name is now because I learned first the glory flower is one of the names in English, but its name really is Kowhai in Maori, and the Maori names are respected. WH is pronounced as an F, so it's a coffee tree, and there are about 9 species of these native that bloom yellow in the spring and into the early summer, and are being grown in gardens because people respect native plants here. Do you recognize this one? It's an alocasia. Steve thought it was elephant's ear. I said, no, it's
not quite big enough.
Sometimes I'm really glad that I don't have these things as perennials in my yard because this was a mighty big clump.
Yeah. Yes.
Close to what, 10 feet across?
And it looks like it's expanding.
Keeps on going. Other things we're working on, I'll tell you later. Yellow blooming tree right now. I said, oh, for crying out loud.
That's on the tree.
This is another one that looks like it's in the myrtle family. The myrtle family is a big group of plants here. The myrtle family includes eucalyptus. It includes the leptospermums that are called Canuka. I'm probably saying that wrong. Canuka trees here. Or white tea tree is one of the other names. And so it looks like it's one of those, but I'm working on that. One of the things you don't see very much here is you will not see very many daffodils or tulips.
No.
There's a single daffodil and
single daffodil, single tulip.
The winter is not conducive to getting them to bloom reliably year after year.
Our host said she throws hers in the freezer for a couple of weeks, her bulbs, and then puts them out.
As you do in, say, Georgia, if you want to have the bulbs. Other bulbs that don't have such a requirement for cold do okay. English bluebells. Remember, one gardener said, I love English bluebells, but I found out that you can't do anything in the area where bluebells are until they finish up. And she said, when I was a young gardener and keen on gardening, but not very informed, I planted these, she said, pointing to some oxalis, and now I have them forever. She says, I'm quite an old gardener now. And I guess I'm just going to have them. I said, yeah, for us, it's things like Star of Bethlehem that we make a mistake. And other mistakes appear to still be being made. Somebody started growing
We still haven't quite
we have
figured
not
out
pinned it
what
down, but
this is.
but if it's not a tree of heaven that leaves out pink before it fades, then it's something very closely related
or something,
and it is a
because
terrible weed. It spreads by root runners. You cut one down, you get 6 more coming back
and
up.
you see it coming up through a lot of plants sometimes.
Yeah.
That
So we're not the only ones who make the mistakes. Even those who've been gardening for a long time with plants that have been around for a long time do it. They, for instance, still pollard trees without cutting back hard once in a while in order to avoid having such a knuckle at the end of the branches that they're keeping small. And there are other things that they do, like plant trees that don't, with the root flare not showing.
I mean, just like we see.
So that when they grow up, they have a girdling root. This one's at the botanical garden, or lose the center of the plant. And we did get to plant. Our host bought a tree fern. This is a ponga. Yes, ponga fern.
Yep.
And it was in a plastic pot.
Plastic. It was in a plastic wrap type pot.
Right. It's like plastic bag. It was a pot, but it was plastic bag thickness. So I cut the bag off of it and took the roots that had grown down the side and took the soil out of the middle. No roots in the middle.
No roots in the middle. These roots just tended to go straight down, like we've told you that they do.
And I spread those roots out.
Spread them out.
Planted them with the roots spread out so that it increased the size of the pot almost twice, spread out that way. So we went from there to the garden center. And we went to one of the bigger garden centers, which we identified. It's so nice to have Google satellite views now. We looked at different garden center names and we looked at them from the air and said, we want that one that has lots of plants and lots of rows, not just an inside greenhouse. And we went to, this is Rogers Garden Center, because at a garden center, I can not only see the foliage of something that I'm trying to identify, but I can read a name tag right on it. Coprosma is another big group of plants, mirror leaf, in lots of species of coprosma used as hedge plants and small trees and ground covers. You can see which things the bees like. I like the local bumblebees with their little orange stripes on them. And you can, we take pictures, Steve and I, of the flower and the leaf and the plant and the tag, and then we have something we can go back to when we see it in the landscape. Things like the various heathers. I think, this is a heather that's blooming. But both Steve and Sonia said, what the
is going on?
I said, well, you weren't with me in California, the garden centers are this way, and many of them. If you don't have to move everything off of your benches in the wintertime to keep it from dying, if you don't have to pick things up and move them around, you tend to make your rows smaller and smaller as you just keep pushing more things into spaces. And it does get a little chaotic. But lots of plants there to look at. If you can just, there was no system we could figure. Certainly no alphabetical system, and certainly nothing that said, here's the native section.
And that row 1 has X and row 2 has Y. Everything had A through Z.
Right. And no evergreen section, because things here are evergreen. Some of them are deciduous, some of them are semi-deciduous, which is the same thing as semi-evergreen. They might lose some leaves during the year, so that some of the categories don't make sense. But it could get easy to lose each other in the garden center.
Well, it was.
Yeah,
I mean,
it helps to have the whistle.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, where are you, Steve? And I found Steve taking a picture. I said, what are you taking a picture of? I looked over his shoulder. I said, oh, what's that? That's his picture. Oh, I see what that is. Do you recognize that plant? That's black-eyed Susan vine, which you might buy as it is in this pot here, set on a little trellis and grow it as a cute annual. I've dealt with it before in California, and it is anything but a cute thing as it gets out into the landscape and spreads over everything I can get a hold of and develops runners underground. Yeah.
An aggressive annual for us is an aggressive perennial for them.
Yeah. And at the garden center, we're also looking at what kind of pots are they growing it in? How are they growing? Are they root pruning things? And what are the differences in what they're growing? We're going to plant a woody shrub this week, and we'll take a look at what woody roots look like. and also prices. It's nice to see that a little tree. This is a coastal coffee. It is $75. It was a reasonable price for this tree that we saw. Many things were $15 and $20 and this is $15 and $20 New Zealand, which right now there's about a $1.70 New Zealand for every year US dollar. So this is a very inexpensive plant.
Yeah.
So that's what we go to garden centers for. Then we went to the botanical garden. I'm going to blast through the botanical garden here because we want to get questions in before we go elsewhere. This is a beautiful botanical garden.
Yes.
Very impressive. This one's up. It almost immediately when we walked out into the gardens, made it onto our top 10 list. It is a city community supported botanical garden, so there's no
entry, no parking fees,
and no big push for membership, although they do ask for donations,
and not a huge gift. They have a very small gift,
but we don't mean to say that that's not something that a garden center shouldn't do, but that
you got a botanic garden,
but that a botanical garden shouldn't do, but that it tells you that the community is supporting what you're looking at.
They support it.
That this is, and boy, do they ever. There were lots of people there and very good information there. These are all pamphlets of plants, shrubs to grow in Auckland, ground covers to grow in Auckland, trees to grow in Auckland.
And they've been tested at this.
Right.
At the Botanic Gardens, and they call them their star performers. And we saw a video with the director when he took over in the 90s, he eliminated all spraying.
Yeah, they don't do pesticides, which is a great thing to see. And that's what a botanical garden is there for, is to explain to people how to do things better.
He tells you if it grows there for us, it will grow for you.
Right. And throughout the garden, they repeat the same theme of helping with the signs. Chicago Botanic Garden does this. Hamilton Botanical Gardens do this, which is nice to have. Great signs where they have the botanical name of the plant. Lots of Molenbeekias, different species of Molenbeekias, Tororaro. This one's sometimes called wireweed in one of its forms. But it has an accession that tells you that this plant was planted in 2009, for instance. And that's it, pruned. I said, oh, okay, so one of their topiary type plants is not boxwood, but it's Torara. This is Torara grown out.
Just not sheared.
Yeah, and I like to see that in a botanical garden. I like to see if I do this to it, what it looks like. If you treat it this way, what you do. This is in the native area because it is a native, and it's being grown out because it's being grown as the natives do. We talked to the gardener at the botanical garden who said that, yeah, I'm kind of glad I'm working over here because it's a little crazy in the native area. It's hard to decide sometimes what to take out because you want the seedlings to grow, but you don't want them to crowd each other. It's a good place to go and see things like, you know what, I'm kind of glad that I do have to plant my cannas every year and I cut them back because they can look a little ragged.
They start to look
when they're perennial.
If they're perennial, we're there all the time.
And you can surprise people in regions unlike your own when you say, well, I just cut them back and start them every year, and they'll say, you can do that. Yep, you can do that. Lavender, brick patterns. See the brick pattern there, as it was in the front yard. Popular brick pattern in the area. Staghorn fern growing on the outside of a plant, or just the weeds. Even the weeds are interesting to us. Bromeliads everywhere. Bromeliads and I mean bromeliads. This one was bigger than a wheelbarrow. Just enormous, beautiful plants grown as for us as house plants, and here grown outside all by themselves. And the clivia that we showed you earlier. I still remember when the clivia that was yellow was being sold for $70 a plant and $100 a plant, and people were sending their private jets to pick up a yellow clivia when they first came out, and here they are just in masses. This week, Steve and I said, oh, look, it's a golden yew. Is that gorgeous?
It was a gorgeous plant.
And we said, wait, I think it's no, it's a podocarpus. It's one of the evergreen. This is another of the big groups of plants here is podocarpus, the family and species in it. And it's one of the ones that is their big needled evergreens. Many of them are called pine of one kind in English, red pine, etc. The natives did not call it that. And many of the evergreens don't look like our evergreens. We consider evergreens to be things like a Christmas tree shape, where this is an evergreen Conica tree. I stood under these and I stood for a minute looking for a tag and then realized I don't need a tag. I said, Stephen, these are camellias. Camellias. I'm standing under camellias. And I looked through the camellias and went, what is that over there? Is that a eucalyptus of some kind? This one was not tagged. So I'm looking for what it is. And I'll tell you why I don't use picture this, which I could use. I said, I should know what this is. I know I can figure this out. Beautiful variegated leaves on a big tree. There's a seed pod. It's in the myrtle family. That's my clue. I'm going to figure it out from that. And I will then remember it as one of the myrtle family plants when I finally get things sorted out. Everybody has their own way to do this. Great things in botanical gardens are things like sculptures. Oh my gosh, I love looking at sculptures. This one's made of shovels. Looks to you like a pineapple or a bromeliad flower. It's shovels.
Some had wooden handles, some had metal.
Yeah. Here's a barrier from the edge of the road.
Used as
compressed and used as a planter. I think that's pretty cool. Whoops. A old whaler. I like that.
Yeah.
That's not just a boat. That's a wreck planted. How about this, Sonia? We were just talking about, and I said, I saw something done. We just, remember?
Yeah, you were talking about it.
Just saw rocks used in a cool way. Look at this. It's a tower of rocks.
We were walking a beach, climbing rocks.
Yeah, the base, we think, Sonia, is buried somewhat into the ground, but it is just the wire form used to stabilize concrete. And pretty cool thing to look at. Some of the native palms sticking out of the wall in sculpture. And this might look like a sculpture, but this is a tree. This is a lancewood. It's called lancewood. And it's a living tree. It's not dropping brown leaves. It's greening up right now. Those are the leaves and the way they look. There's a story about this, and we'll tell that story when we get to a nature center later. It's one of the native trees here. Aren't they cool? So they're greening up right now, budding out.
And where you see familiars.
Yeah, where else can you see? Steve said, he stood there and looked at this and said, where else can you see a cherry tree blooming next to a palm tree behind an evergreen tree that has nothing to do with any of the evergreens that we have, and all of it over shrubs, topiary in the English style, and flax from the native New Zealand grasslands, and lots of topiary, lots of plants, shrub. This is European style. I
can't imagine the amount of.
Yeah, we took a look and looked at it, and there's not much thinning done. They prune them, and it would appear they replant on a regular basis because styles change. We saw pictures of this garden as it was in the 70s and 80s when it was new, and the style was entirely different than now.
Entirely.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to see that progression.
Can't you just imagine being the one that has to keep this figured out? You see, oh no, where was I on this? Oh, well, we'll just make a new little one over here.
Yeah.
And there is that, what Steve and I thought was a golden yew, but was a podocarpus called okay, I've forgotten. The common name starts with an M. The Maori name for it starts with an M, and I've forgotten right now. Mamuka. No, that's a tree fern. Anyway, the same plant that we saw grown in the native area, big and wild, pruned, and just like we do use.
Yep. In a nice little ball.
Yep. And just sheared. Here we are poking inside to see
how deep does it go?
Yeah. Just a few inches. So what questions do you have so far about orienting yourself? Because it's a priority for us. Orient ourselves, figure out what's out there and what we know and what we need to figure out.
Well, I think the only question really that's come in is actually pertinent to all of the shearing and pruning. Stacy says if they do so much pruning, how do they handle the plant refuse? Do they do composting? And I know I spoke to one gardener at an Auckland municipal garden. It sounds like lots and lots of composting for them, but I wasn't sure if you guys had spoken to individual gardeners about what they do with their clips.
We did, and there has been a tightening of what to do with yard waste. in the years during COVID, because New Zealand closed the doors to keep.
I mean, they literally closed the doors.
And much of their yard waste was being sent elsewhere to compost. So was their recycling. So now people are being asked to recycle more of their own, and more individuals are composting on their own place rather than giving it to the municipality to handle.
We talked to two gardeners at a school grounds, and they were cleaning an area up, and we asked them what do they do with the debris, and they have a compost area in the back of their school area.
And after they said, well, we have a compost area, they said, well, we're trying to have a
compost area. Yeah.
So they're just learning this. But yes, it is a point, and not just in people's yards, because it's all year, every year. These plants that are deciduous are like our evergreen, like our evergreen spruces and pines, etc., still lose needles at some point. And they might fall a little bit all year.
So there's needles, leaves falling all year
time.
long, and everything's growing all year long.
So it is something that I asked one gardener. I said, "Do you get a break?" Well, yeah. She says, "I like to be out here." I said, "I like to have a break. I really like to have one season of the year when I could say I do not have to be out there doing stuff." Then we'll keep on going, because it gets to be more fun to do this. There's the native Kaunua palm. Yeah. There's that Clivia again. So that's it for part 1. We'll break up our recording now and stay tuned for part 2.